Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Many of your favorite gurus online are talking about how we're in a debt collapse, that the bond market is collapsing. And I would argue that the data shows that the bond market collapse occurred from mid 2020 to October 2022. And since then, we've been in a rising bond market that's producing positive returns. So the debt collapse ended in October 2022. That's what the data shows. Let's have a look firstly at the Vanguard Total World Bond ETF, so a fund that measures the collective price performance of the global debt market, of the bond market. And we can see in mid 2020, when central banks were printing trillions of dollars to artificially suppress interest rates, they had to, the flip side of that is they made the price of debt go to a ridiculously high price. And then, of course, from then until October 2022, the world bond market fell about 20% in price. That's actually a very significant drop for a bond for the world bond market. Topic for another video. But you can see from the low in October 2022, the world bond market has produced about 6% capital gain and paid 3-4% interest on top of that. So there's been positive returns. You might say, well, John, what about the US bond market? This is the total bond market. So for the US, again, same thing. I won't keep repeating the decline because it's all pretty similar. October 2022 was the bottom. And since then, the US bond market has produced an overall return of 8% capital growth with interest paid on top of that. And you might say, well, John, maybe it's emerging market nations. It's nations outside the Western world that have seen the decline. Of course, they peaked in 2020, a more severe decline, a 39% decline. But again, the low, again, October 2022, and the emerging market, the bond market for emerging market nations up 19% and paying about 6% yield on top of that. Well, John, maybe it's corporate bonds, maybe it's US corporate bonds that have collapsed in price. Yes, they did. Again, they bottomed in October. They actually bottomed in 2020, but there was a bottom again in October 2022. Since then, the US corporate bond market has produced 12% capital gain while paying roughly 5 to 6% yield on top of that. The one that has performed the worst, that is still at the same price as it was, or roughly the same price as 2022, is the long-term US bond market that's struggling. Keep in mind, though, the key interest rate, the 10-year US bond yield, is the same as it was in October 2022. So that key rate has held strong. My apologies. Eyes are watering at how awesome this data is. The US debt, keep in mind, the US government had to reborrow $9 trillion in 2025, an additional 1.9 trillion of borrowing on top of that. And with all that 11 trillion or so of borrowing, nothing happened to the bond market, no collapse. And of course, if the bond market is in fact in a collapse, this is my performance portfolio. The bonds I bought, how was I able to produce a 19% return since October 2023? I'm not some genius trader. The reality is the bond market bottomed in October 2022. Cheers.